What's up, guys? I'm the Taco Viking and I'm here with my Rush SR. I've had this bad boy for about a year now and I have been driving the absolute crap out of this thing non-stop. I've got close to 3,000 miles on it already. However, every session I take it out for, it barfs out a ton of water. I assume that's because it's water. It gets to a boiling point, it gets hot, and then it spits out of the radiator. However, someone was driving behind me this weekend and said, man, you are barfing out a ton of water during these sessions. And the car starts to get very hot towards the end of the session. So, looking back at it, the very first time I drove this car, it overheated to the moon. We are talking temperatures in excess of 280 degrees. Hot enough that it fried the ECU. We put on a new ECU and the thing fired right up, so I assumed no harm, no foul. Must be all right. However, looking at what the guys are saying, that it's barfing out so much coolant and it's getting hot towards the end of the sessions, I think we need to do some serious testing on this motor to see if it's actually still fit to fight. My car was the first non-dealer car to come out of the factory. So I'm the first customer and I had to deal with a lot of bugs out of the gate. They refined a lot of things and changed tons of stuff about the car. The cooling system is the biggest change for sure. From the factory, they ran straight silicone for all the tubing, which they still do. Not gonna knock it, but I think it's a little expensive and I prefer the aluminum pipes because it also helps with cooling. So I obviously redid all my cooling pipes in the big sections anyways with aluminum tubing, bent them, made it fit in there nice and neat. They use the same kind of radiator as this, but prior to my modifications, they were running fans on this side of the radiator. So you were expecting them to push the air through the radiator, which is never as efficient as pulling, not to mention it didn't have a shroud. They have now gone to a system like mine. I switched to a 3-fan, 9-inch fans with a shroud, and it greatly improved the cooling on this thing. However, it was still barfing out coolant every time I went out. They've gone to a 10-inch system on the back that also draws a lot more amperage. I haven't upgraded to that because I haven't upgraded my electrical system on the car yet. That's coming. We'll worry about that stuff in the future. But for now, we're gonna start off by doing a block test in the radiator and then a compression test in the motor to see what's going on with this thing. Since this thing is pushing out coolant, that means that we need to check this thing to see if there's compression leaking out of the cylinders into the cooling system. That means that when the piston comes up, gas is escaping through the head gasket, a crack in the block, a crack in the head, or something like that, a warped head, into the cooling system. You won't see oil in the system, you won't see coolant in the oil because that's just not where the bend is in the machine. So we have these cool tools called a block tester, where you take this little device, you fill it full of a chemical, and you stab it into your radiator. If that chemical changes color, that means that carbon monoxide from the combustion inside of the cylinders is making its way into the coolant system. You got a leak, you're losing the performance. It's not a good. So, first things first, we'll test this. Block testing is pretty simple. Remove your radiator cap. Take the block tester unit itself. Fill it up to the fluid line. And then stuff it in your radiator. Next up, you take this little squeezy ball guy, like the thing your mom used to put in your ear when you had an ear infection, and you stuff it into the hole. This way, you can suck the air out of the system while the engine is running. Now, fire up your play toy and let them ponies scream. Your engine really needs to be warmed up for this. So we're just gonna sit here and let this baby warm up and keep an eye on this chemical. As the engine warms up, you'll start seeing some air come out of the system. That's the expansion of everything inside of the cooling system, which is totally normal. However, on my motor, I think we're gonna see a bit more because I have a sneaking suspicion that there's actually gas leaking out of the cylinders into the cooling system. Let's see. Ran a full test on the bad boy, and that is yellow. Not good. That means that there is absolutely carbon monoxide in my cooling system, which tells me that something is wrong inside of this motor. Whether it's a warped head, blown head gasket, cracked block, cracked head, I don't know. But this is not good. Well, given the results of the block test, we know this motor is a little bit foot. However, I believe in being thorough, so we're gonna do a compression test on all of the thing. You'll need a compression tester gauge and the itty bitty little fitting for these tiny little spark plugs in this bad boy. We'll pull off the intake, pull out the spark plugs one at a time, and then check compression on each cylinder. Survey says another 93 PSI. So, according to the book, Suzuki says you can have 28 PSI difference between each cylinders. We definitely meet the mark on that. However, standard compression for a Suzuki GSX 1000cc motor is 188 PSI to 226 PSI, which means we are way off the mark. This motor is losing a ton of power. The fact that I am still able to keep up with other cars out on the track and put down decent times is unbelievable. This motor absolutely needs to be rebuilt. This could be worn cylinder walls, worn piston rings, but most likely because of the overheat and the carbon monoxide in the coolant system, the head is warped and the head gasket has failed.
I did my best. I did my best.
Whether it's a bad head gasket or warped head, I don't care. I'm rebuilding this motor. Luckily, Suzuki motors are in great abundance. I've got a spare one right here I can toss in here while this one's at the machine shop, and I can get right back out on the track. That's real nice. There we go. A used motor out of a crashed bike with barely 1,000 miles on it. And look at that. It even came with a starter. What a deal. These things are like 500 bucks if you want to buy just a starter. So pretty cool that this setup came with a starter already in it. Now I can take all my sensors, aim devices, and everything else, transport them over to this motor, and bada boom, bada bing, in we go. This ought to be fun. Rush Auto Works for a rebuild. I am gonna say that getting the header out of the cradle in this thing is a bit of a nightmare. You gotta find the right angle to pull the motor out, but they definitely recommend taking it out with the header still on it. Getting the bolts into the header, a little tricky once it's inside of the car. So, since I'm part of that spec series with the Rush car, I have to send this motor back to Houston, Texas for Rush Auto Works to do the rebuild on it. These are holographically sealed motors because they don't want anybody doing crazy modifications to the motor. They don't want big cams, ported heads. They want everybody to have an equal amount of power so that the series is more about the driver than it is about the car. I'm ready to get this one back into the crate, head into Houston, and put my spare motor right back in the car so I can get out on the track. I've been fighting putting the motor in the Rush for a couple of hours now, and I just discovered something. Down here on the bottom motor mount, you'll notice a notch right there. On my old motor, it is quite clear that it's been ground out some. That would have been really useful information 2 hours ago. Now that this area is smoothed out here, hopefully the motor will slide in there just a little easier now. We'll find out. Well, would you look at that? The new motor is in there, everything's plugged in, chains on, cables are adjusted, and all that stuff is ready to rock and roll. Now let's talk about some very important stuff, the fluids. In my race car, I use Motul products exclusively. Their oils, their brake fluids, their coolant, even their chain wax. Everything they have can take a beating, and it's specially formulated for racing, especially their oil. This is a motorcycle engine. That means that the oil not only lubricates the engine, but it also lubricates the gearbox. These have a dog box, a sequential shifting action that requires special lubricants in order to operate properly. This stuff is specially formulated just for that, and it can take a beating. I hammer on this stuff all day long, and I've never had a problem with it. This is a completely dry motor and transmission. That means that by the book, this thing needs about 3.6 quarts to fill it, or 115.2 ounces, or whatever, math and junk. So I like to fill up a bucket first and then dump it all in there, so I'm not trying to read the line on the side of a can. Never works. Oh, easy now, Nelly, getting a little sloppy there. Look at, oh, what's in my hair? I think I did everything right, so moment of truth. It's alive! Yeah! Well, there you have it. Full motor swap on a Rush SR. Is it hard? I mean, if you've ever spun a wrench before, you can probably accomplish this task. If you got any questions about it, hit me up. Hit that like button, share this thing, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching.